of the Randwick Local Planning Panel. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands we occupy for this meeting, the Aboriginal people, their spirits and ancestors. We pay our respects to elders past and present. The meeting today is to consider the determination of one application only. We do have a separate non-public meeting with a few items. The panel members for this matter are myself, Lindsay Fletcher as the independent chair, Brendan Randalls and Heather Wharton as the independent expert members of the panel, and the community member, Kerry Hamer. This meeting is being held by public video conferencing due to COVID-19 precautions. As the panel chair, I'm requesting that you be considerate and respectful of each other and remain on mute until I ask you to speak at the meeting. I also request that none of you interject while another person is speaking, otherwise I'll have to request that you no longer take part. The panel operates in terms of a code of conduct and operating guidelines, which have been modified to facilitate the effective functioning of this panel. And the details of those temporary changes are available on the council website. The public meeting will be recorded and will be placed on the council's website following the meeting. If that is of concern to you on privacy grounds, then I suggest you take it into consideration in your decision to make a public statement before the panel today. In terms of the code, general declarations of interest have been provided before the meeting by all panel members, as well as a specific declaration of interest in relation to the matter being considered today. I can confirm that all declarations of interest have been received, but I might just ask each of the panel members to confirm that they have no conflict of interest to declare in relation to this item.
I have no conflicts.
Thank you. Kerry, you don't either, I think, but you're on mute.
That's right. Kerry Hamer, I have no conflict of interest. Thank you.
Hi, this is Heather Wharton. I have no conflicts, Lindsay.
Thank you, panel members. The signed declarations of interest will also be available to view through the council's website by tomorrow afternoon. I also have to advise that all members of the public addressing the panel today must declare prior to commencing their address any political contributions or donations exceeding $1,000 made over the past 2 years to any political party or candidate who contested the last ordinary election of the council. Our usual practice is to allow each speaker 3 minutes to present, including speakers representing community groups and the applicant. If you have registered to speak, your address to the panel will be recorded. You'll be given a warning signal about 30 seconds before your time limit. I do have a limited discretion to allow extra time if appropriate. We will first hear from councillors, but in fact there is no councillors registered to speak, followed by members of the public and then from the applicant. The panel has been provided with a copy of all of the submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the application. Therefore, there is no need for speakers to repeat the points made in those submissions. I ask that each speaker be heard in silence while they are addressing the panel, and that courtesy and respect be observed throughout the meeting. There is to be no personal criticism of any speaker or of the council staff. Any such criticism would be contrary to the panel's code of conduct and will not be accepted. Panel members may ask questions of the speakers to clarify our understanding of what is being said. After hearing from all speakers, the panel will adjourn to debate the matter and make its determination. If more information is required by the panel, the decision may be deferred, either for a further public meeting or to be dealt with electronically. The panel decision and recording will be made available on the council's website as soon as possible, usually the following day. There is to be no recording of this meeting other than the official recording. So with that introduction, we will now move on to considering the applications before us. It's DA 366 of 2021 for 456 Maroubra Road, Maroubra. We have two people registered to address the panel on this matter, Mr. David Cannell, an objector, and Mr. Duncan Bond, an architect, I believe, on behalf of the applicant. So I now invite the first speaker, Mr. David Cannell, to address the panel.
Hi everyone. Firstly, no, I have not made any political donations. Can I also make it clear that we're not against development and think that the building's generally well designed, even if squashing more people than we thought appropriate in a dense area. We had just one request for the amended DA of the developers, which was to effectively be a considerate neighbour regarding view and privacy loss, the same way our building was designed. Our building respects the neighbour to the west that wants a view to the east of the ocean, and it also makes concessions for the neighbour's privacy. We have no western window, bar one small glazed tilting window that cannot be seen out of. This development makes less concessions in that way than our building does, as it has a side window that can be viewed through. Plus, it also has a massive veranda which runs the full width of the building. Also in passing, from my brief experiences with DAs, I'd like to note that it appears to me there's a flaw in the processes whereby new buildings are analysed for the amount of natural light they let in, but from what I can tell, there's no consideration to the blocking of natural light shining into the internals of buildings around them. Another DA behind us removed the majority of natural light that shines into our block of units, and this one will remove the tiny glimpse that was left, leaving us with none. Now I'll quickly share a subset of slides which were presented before that are in our submission. Firstly, the veranda on the new building appears to extend approximately the same distance as ours, but that's more because the gutter seems to grow as it goes around the building, so it's not exactly immediately apparent that it does stick out further than our one. Now I'll quickly show you some of the views that will be lost for us by the building. So we watch, basically there's a lot of different views and things that we appreciate about the view that we have all out the side window. None of these things we'll see anymore because we won't notice them anymore. These are from our living area and it's the only place that we see them. We don't see whales. 100% of the whales and dolphins we see from our living area out the window that's going to be blocked. All the storms and sunsets. We even look at the shipping. Now, this is what the change will be for us privacy-wise. The impact for us is massive. We're not in a big house, it's just a small unit. We only have a combined kitchen lounge as our living area apart from the bedrooms. And this is what the change will be for us. The drawings clearly aren't professional, but I spent a lot of time making sure that they're to scale. So this is sitting on our lounge. So you can see that the side will be totally blocked and there's ready view coming through. So inside the light blue line is our living area. And the red area is where we will have a loss of privacy. People will be able to see in where it's red. There's nowhere else in our little unit unless we go off to a bedroom, and this is a stairwell up the top right. That's the entirety of our living area, which we'll lose privacy for. And this isn't for people that are in a distance. They're just meters away. We did suggest that there could be modifications made to the scale of the veranda for the DA that would respect the neighbour to the west the same way that our building does for our neighbour uphill to the west. Our veranda doesn't run across the full width of the building. It gives them some privacy. So those are the questions and the confusion for us. That's what we're trying to understand. How, like, there's zero impact in moving the building, the DA building's veranda back to their privacy or their view. And so we don't understand why this hasn't been done.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Panel members, do you have any questions of Mr. Cannell?
Mr. Cannell, this is Brendan Randall speaking. I'm an architect, and so I'm often involved in apartment buildings, and I know the apartment design guide very well, which is a reasonable document for controlling impacts on privacy. And this document and typical practice these days puts side walls on balconies. It has balconies that actually face directly out but do not turn as, you know, as this one's doing in your case. The suggestion I'd make to you is the balconies would be a lot better, notwithstanding the fact that they protrude. They're very, very big balconies, I admit that. But in my experience, balconies like this work a lot better when they have sides. So they're not just open balustrades as you've drawn on your sketch. So my question would be to you, you know, my suggestion to these people would be to make much more amenable balconies that focus out to the front rather than to the side. But of course, that would probably increase your loss of sky in that picture there.
Correct.
I just wonder what you think of that, because, you know, that would be a better balcony would actually have sides.
I'd have to think about it because it would also impact the view as well in this area here.
Well,
But
it's
we would love for you to consider it. Sorry.
Can you see what you've drawn? You've drawn people looking back at you.
Yep.
And this is something that I think is a real issue. It's not just the fact that their balconies are going to bear the brunt of all this weather and, you know, they're not particularly comfortable looking balconies. And if they're not used very well, they'll be packed with storage. That's what tends to happen to them. But also the idea that people are looking back at you, I find really confronting. But can you see that it's kind of it's a bit of an issue, because your balcony too is designed similarly.
Ours is, but it doesn't go across the full width of the building, so that for our neighbour, can you see the equivalent, if you can see the crosshatch in the shared picture?
Yes, I'm looking.
Yeah, it goes down here and across here in this DA, whereas our building has preserved the view and increased the distance for privacy from our veranda. In our building, it doesn't maximise the space that it could use, so it allows our neighbour to be more distant from us, plus also to have the increased view running through across the front of our building.
Whereas this is a bit different, because your building has one apartment facing outwards and this one has two apartments.
Correct.
So, you know, what you're suggesting is quite, it's a little bit different. But that's all I wanted to ask you. I was just interested in your comments in response to this privacy impact, that people sitting out in that balcony will be looking directly at your balcony and directly into your living room.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you, Brendan. Mr. Connell, could I also ask whether you're aware that there's the application is recommended for approval by the council staff, but amongst the conditions is a condition requiring, in fact, privacy screens to be erected, effectively on the edge of that balcony, which would prevent people doing what your diagram illustrates and the concern that Mr. Randles has raised. But it also has the effect, of course, of affecting that view across the side boundary.
Yeah, that's...
Are you aware of that condition, and do you have any comments to make on whether you support the condition?
I would prefer that the veranda be brought back in, and that the...
So brought back in so that nobody would be visible on the balcony? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I mean, I think it's all about compromise and juggling the loss of view with increasing privacy. And potentially, if the veranda came back by half, then it wouldn't, because if we get if the veranda stays the same size and a privacy screen's put in, then the impact here is going to be the same as the side window. So we'll effectively have gained privacy, which is, of course, always a positive for us, but then the view loss out to the east will be massive.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify whether you were aware of that condition. Thank you. Panel members, any other panel members have question or comment stage?
If you could put up your plan again, if you could put up a plan, but I'm just trying to think through the two issues that sort of run against each other. You can see that they have partially got a wall that extends, they extend the wall of their building partially into the balcony.
They do.
If that wall was extended a bit, but then a planter was introduced along the front of the balcony or something like that, so that you could really start enclosing the balcony a bit more, but also preventing people getting right out to the edge of the balcony, putting their chair there and looking directly back into your place and your terrace. I mean, do you think there's a way that they could sort of mediate between what they're proposing and a design solution that, you know, addresses both things? I sort of get the impression they could, to tell you the truth.
We are going to hear from the architect shortly.
Yes. I don't know.
So
it was just a thought. Yep. Okay.
I'm happy to hear from Mr. Connell on that as well, but it's perhaps a question the architect may have some comments to make on.
Yeah, no, we do appreciate that there's some wall there, and I did look at the impact of extending it and what the increased view loss would be, and it is considerable as it extends forward and increases the privacy. But we're definitely, we would love some form of compromise. That would be excellent.
Okay, thank you. Other panel members?
No, my issues have been addressed with those questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Me too.
I'm okay.
Right. Okay, that's good. So thank you. We'll now hear from the applicant's representative, Mr. Duncan Bond. Duncan, I understand you're the architect for the matter?
Correct, yes. We're Ergo Architecture. We've done the design. We've been in fairly lengthy process of negotiation with council, principally around these issues that are being discussed now. Strangely enough, with regard to that side wall, it was longer. But as you can appreciate, everyone here, we had this balancing act to perform between allowing views across the balcony, but also allowing the tenants of the building to enjoy the same things that the neighbours are enjoying. So trying not to obscure their view, but trying to maintain their privacy at the same time. It's almost impossible balancing act to achieve. We're also, I don't know if you can see the plans, but the building to the east of us is quite a bit further forward. They're only about, say, 1.5 meters off the boundary. So we've set our front wall pretty much in the same alignment, even slightly further back to the neighbours that have addressed the panel to the east, to the west. But yes, obviously the balconies extend beyond that, but the reason for the limited structure on the balconies is to try and maintain the visual connection to the east across the balcony, which obviously then allows people to look back if they were so inclined to do so. We can move the wall out again, although we brought it back for the very reason to try and maintain the view. And that was part of the negotiation process that we went through with Tegan Ward, who was the assessing planner. Obviously, just on another note, with regard to that side window, I think, I don't know, I haven't checked the condition, but I imagine it's been a condition to have obscure glazing of some sort, which is fine. We would have expected that anyway. But with the balcony, yes, I mean, obviously putting a privacy screen up would solve the privacy problem, but as we've seen, it would create further obstruction to view. It's a difficult one to manage. We've maintained the same front setback. We have a balcony because principally it's the main entertainment space of the units, and it's obviously looking at the coastal setting, the view, which in this instance is to the south and east. But it's I don't know, it's an almost impossible one to get perfect. I think, like I said, we had a slightly longer wall before, but as part of the process of negotiation with council, we brought that back. If we put something back there like a planta is plausible, we probably have to extend the wall slightly anyway to just make sure we've got the bearing structure, because we've tried to limit the structure to avoid obstruction of view. And so it's pretty much cantilevering. To be putting planters and things like that on is obviously going to have its implications on the structure. So happy to consider something along those lines. Obviously, they are large balconies, but because, as I say, they're the principal entertainment space of these units, we've tried to keep them a decent size. If the front was to be brought back to a similar alignment as the neighbours, that could be a possibility. But aside from that, we feel like we've done our best to try and maintain a balance between the two. And in light of the fact that, we've now reduced the building to well under the height limit, and the obviously any development there, regardless of its size, would always have put its views and living spaces on that side of the building towards the south and east, facing the beach and the main street side. And it was inevitable that there would have to be some kind of balancing happening in terms of the neighbours to the west looking to the east. But that said, there is still significant views, and the little basic view analysis we did that's in the report shows that we've pulled that wall back, and you do actually get views. They're not same views, they may not be whales, but there's still significant views straight out to the south and partly to the southeast. But look, what can I say? It's an impossible thing to maintain everything if you're going to develop the site. The site currently is well underdeveloped in terms of what's around it, and with, as you say, there's 2 units facing forward, so the balcony's inevitably again going to be full width, but it's actually reasonably well balanced, I think, in terms of trying to maintain privacy and view. If the preference is for privacy, I don't know why people would be looking back when the principal view is obviously the main thing that people are out there for. But happy to consider some options in terms of privacy. It wouldn't actually affect us, obviously, because we're the ones with the eastern aspect. But yeah, if the panel has some ideas on that, we have to consider them. But yeah, that's as far as I can really address those issues.
Was there any other matters? Thank you for responding to those concerns. Was there any other matters you wish to address us on before
we were
open to
principally
questions?
representing just to respond to any concerns and any questions that the panel or any objectors would have had. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I might just quickly clarify. You said that wall has already been moved back a little.
Correct.
Can you be more precise? What how much was it?
I think it was
from
about
the original?
400 or 500 millimeters further forward before.
Okay.
I can check the original DA drawings, but
So in the order of 400 or 500 millimeters.
yeah.
You also said you could consider
You can
adjusting the balcony to align with. I think you said you could consider.
Sorry. Carry on.
I think you said you could consider adjusting the balcony to align with the neighbours. Does that mean setting it a little further back from the street to align with the neighbours?
The front edge of it could go back. It's not going to obviously significantly change anything in terms of privacy, but if that was, I mean, you can see, I don't know, as I was saying, I don't know if you've got the set of drawings in front of you that council are looking at, but in the west elevation, I can probably share it with you. Let me just see if I can do that.
I'm looking at the floor plans and it shows. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the eastern elevation that we're talking about. That red line there was the original sidewall, and then the new wall is further back from that. So it looks about 500 or 600 mil. And then, yeah, you can see that the building beyond us is quite a bit further forward again. And that's actually a solid wall. So, yeah, just showing you that.
Do you have the opposite view that is showing the alignment with the objectors building?
Looking at, yes, hang on, I'll go back to that. Sorry, I just took it up. So that's the east elevation looking back.
Right.
The blue line is the existing building, and the red line is the DA, the original DA, and then we've pulled it back. And we haven't pulled back the edge of the balcony, and you can see that the column on the balcony of the unit beyond, which is the western end. So
it might be something like 300 millimeters. Just looking at that it would come back in order to align with that column. Would that be right?
In that order, yes. Probably just. Yeah.
I was just wanting to clarify what you were saying might be acceptable from your client's point of view.
Would bring it back to that roughly that alignment. Again, looking at the plan.
Okay. So, panel members, any questions of Mr. Bond?
Yes, I have a suggestion, Lindsay. Obviously, this is of concern to the neighbours, and of course, you want an orderly development, and it'd be best if you could reach some kind of compromise. One of the things we often suggest, and the BCA does as well, is the use of solid balustrades in particular circumstances. And I think privacy is one of these things where, yeah, sure, you couldn't imagine why somebody would be looking back and doing that, but it's this sense that people will or could that actually it's unnerving. Or when there's a large gathering, the fact that it's just all, you know. So you could probably modify things, modify the conditions slightly. Excuse me for showing this drawing, by having, number one, solid balustrades at the sides, and also by shifting them in slightly, so modifying your balcony so they're slightly narrower, not radically narrower, but the plan would then show a kind of functional thing that could be all right as well, that you get a kind of cupboard. But these upturns could be slightly higher than a normal balustrade. They might be 1,200 instead of 1,000 or something. But what it would, I think it'd have a huge impact on this idea that you're looking at people's knees and shoes. You're looking at the whole, you're looking at the whole gamut. This is actually containing it a bit. And if somebody happens to have their attitude to their veranda where they've got their mops out there and whatever, it actually contains that view in a way that might be a little bit more polite. Do you think there's a chance you could think of having your open balustrade to the front, but at the side having a more solid balustrade?
If that was the recommendation, that's something that could be done. Again, we were just trying to maintain as much visual sort of connectivity to the east as possible. And that's why we had the side wall for some degree of privacy, but tried to keep it as open as possible. If it was the recommendation that we try and reduce that visual, transparency, then sure, that's something we could do. It won't affect our visual outlook. But we'd obviously try and, as you drew it, we'd make it both sides. But because we've got the neighbour next to us on the east is quite a bit further forward, it's not going to impact the residents of that building at all. So if it's something that would make our neighbours happier, then it's certainly something we'd consider.
It might even work better for your future residents to have a tiny little bit more solidity at the sides.
Well, yeah, and in terms of wind and things, I guess it could be help protect the balconies. Yeah. Well, I think most of the wind probably comes straight from the south, but anyway.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for
that.
Can I just clarify? I take it that there is a solid privacy screen between the two balconies on each level.
Again, there's a wall, and then be a slightly higher section of fence that sort of acts as a screen. Yeah, so a bit denser palisading, but predominantly again to try and maintain views across to the east. There's not a lot of privacy screening between the two, apart from the extended wall.
So, in other words, sorry.
No.
Lindsay, I just wanted to confirm with the architect. I take it you're not really enthusiastic about this kind of fencing that's put on the side there, and what it actually ends up looking like. It doesn't really. It intrudes into their view line again.
Sorry. You weren't talking.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to clarify what the privacy fences look like. It's sort of a generic phrase that council puts onto these things, but it's hard to sort of determine, well, what do they look like? I can't see them anywhere on your elevations, but it strikes me that they could just be these dangling fences up there looking as though they want to blow down or something, but also they will obscure views.
Which are we talking about now? Sorry.
Privacy screens.
On the sides?
Yes, if somebody simply says to you, put privacy screens there, what are they going to look like?
Well, if the request is to do that, aside from the solid upstand as you've suggested on the ends, it's going to be something we try and make it as nice as possible, but they're a hard thing to deal with in this way.
I know.
But it would have to be like I have to think about that one if we were going to do it. Yeah, it's something we want to consider.
That's what I was trying to I was trying to understand what you're proposing between the two balconies, where they abut each other on the front there. There'll be a need for privacy between those two balconies. And, I'm not an architect, only a humble planner, but I would have thought some compatibility of the design outcome with the privacy screens the council's calling for under its conditions would make some sense.
Nothing's shown, I don't think, on the front elevation.
Well, is that the case? Is it limited to the extent of the dividing wall?
Basically, yeah. I mean, we've got the balustrade carries back to the dividing wall. Essentially, the dividing wall is, again, similar to what the end sides are, is the sort of privacy between. Now, obviously, if it was stipulated that we need to put privacy between them, it's not actually a requirement. But
also, thinking the two balconies didn't need privacy between them.
You said it's not a
not necessarily. I mean, if you're out there enjoying the view and the open air, then you've got a wall between. But if you wanted to be back further, you can. If you want to go further out, then you're exposed to the street and everything. So yeah, you know.
But one could stand on the corner of the balcony and look directly into the apartment next door, if that's the case, which is clearly unacceptable.
Well, and the same goes at the end. You can look back to the other apartment. So if we want to pull the walls further forward, then we start obstructing views, and we can do that if that's the recommendation, or putting screens up. And obviously, then we'd have to go into sort of consideration of how they're designed.
Can you see any reason why you wouldn't have a solid wall between the two balconies?
Yeah, because obviously it's going to significantly impact the apartment to the west in terms of, I mean, maybe you could not maybe bring it all the way up, maybe a little bit further forward, but not out to the very edge, I would have thought. So, just because if you're in that western apartment, you're kind of very much limited if you pull a wall all the way up to the front there.
Right, I see.
In terms of your enjoyment of the same
They could
views.
put plants or things like that across there anyway to obscure, to give themselves privacy. They could put pot plants all the way along.
There are other balcony treatments along there that have that kind of sense of sharing in between the units, because everybody, you know, the views to people in that area are very important. So I know there's lots of considerations that people have made, that they'd rather have the view versus all the privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions from panel members?
Yes, just on the balcony issue, is there any reason why it couldn't be pulled back and be made a bit shorter? Like, it's quite generous. And I guess a large balcony in that location, you'd have potentially a lot of people gathering there, which is a potential amenity issue in its own consideration, regardless of the closeness to the other unit, which means the impact's exacerbated. Does it have to be that big?
It is the principal entertainment space or a private open space for the units. There's not a practical area for communal open space, so apart from obviously enjoying the promenade and beach and all of that, it is possible to certainly bring it back, but I wouldn't think with that, I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of my client, I think they'd be happy to bring it back to the same sort of depth of the neighbours. There are also limitations in terms of a 3-bedroom balcony size within the set as well. But I think there's scope to reduce it to some extent, but I think that might extend to something similar to the neighbour's size.
Okay. And I've got an additional issue. It's to do with the view. In the officer's report, there's a photo montage. I don't think it's affecting this particular neighbour. I think it's 21. The figure that shows the view impact it shows it before you made an amendment to the building to make it lower, and then it shows it after. It's quite a precise impact in terms of this. That neighbour can still see some of the beach. They can still see the headland, but if it was slightly changed, they would lose that. My question is, do you have any surveyor certification, or how can the panel be sure that is going to be the outcome? Like, I know the Land and Environment Court, when they're looking at photo montages, has rules about how the photo montages are constructed, which involves the focal length of the camera, the survey points, the survey point at where the view line was taken, and so on. What sort of tools were used to produce that photo montage and the view impact?
We prepared those. We actually prepared them predominantly for communication with the planner. I wasn't aware she'd put them in the report, but that's not a problem. I understand why. The technology is simply the 3D modeling and matching up with photographs. The accuracy of that Obviously, if you are going to the extent of a land and environment court, you'd be engaging view consultants, and it'd be a much more precise process, and it would be out of our hands. So that would have to be something that would be requested. If basically, I mean, we feel like the building has been dropped significantly, and the removal of all of those top roof plant and the pop-up roof, which was providing sun to that top units from the north. Given that the building was always going to be pushed, as I said, predominantly forward, the side setbacks and the height are now well within compliant in terms of that front volume, which is the bit that would be impacting that view from that balcony. Yes, if a request was made to have a more precise and accurate, I don't know how those are done, but it would be put into the consultant's hands if that was being requested. But these particular images were prepared through SketchUp, basically, which is a 3D modeling program that you can then overlay images, photographic images, and match up your model with images. We've obviously based the model on our survey information and align them as best we can. But obviously it's not 100% accurate, but I think it's a fair representation of what would happen. And we did that as part of our process of communicating with the planner.
Okay, thank you.
Lindsay, I have a question regarding level 1 floor plan. In the middle, where the two apartments join behind the staircase, there's an area that's unidentified as anything, and I'm just wondering what it is, please.
Okay, so next to the bed 1, is it we're talking?
Yes, but yeah, between the bed 1s and opposite the, I presume they're en suites.
Yes, so that's an extension of the road. So
okay.
You've got roads within the room, and then an extra section of road which is within an enclosed area.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not to ask for any comments from the objectors as to the, what's their thoughts about the suggestions that have been made, other than chop it all off completely. What may be the best solution for them?
Could we get the response to the solid upturn idea from Brendan?
From Duncan, you mean?
No, from
the neighbours, the objectors. They did have their hand up.
Right.
Dave.
Well, perhaps before we move back to the objectors, give them a moment to contemplate that. But was there any other questions of the architect? And
yes, I do have one more thing, Lindsay. Look, I'm a little bit troubled by the lobby. It's a very, very small lobby, and it doesn't have light. I can understand why it doesn't, but that puts it in, so it's therefore not compliant with the ADG. Sometimes I've seen in situations like that, the stair is, you work through this with a BCA guy, that you actually have an open stair with doors that can shut in case of fire. So then it becomes a fire protected stair. But then you might be able to have an open stair with a skylight to bring light down so that the lobbies have nice amenity. It might be worth considering, because that's a very, very small lobby. I don't think I've ever seen such a small lobby. And, at the moment the building is accessible and everything, but, this would question whether or not it's accessible. So it just might be worth considering. It could be a way that you're just using some kind of innovative fire solution to therefore have a much more pleasant and, high quality lobby that's more comfortable for the residents.
Yeah, I mean, our consideration of that is that it's a lobby that serves 2 units. You're transitioning through that in a moment's notice. You're going from the lift to the door and you're in. Given it's not a large lobby serving a lot of units, and because of the nature of the site and the way that the central core had to work, being quite a narrow site and having the 2 units, having to get light in, as you say, would have to be done something like that through an open stair. Not something we considered to be a priority given the minimal time you're going to be spending in that lobby, and there's only the two. There's the possibility of there was a consideration of bringing some natural light into the ground floor lobby by jigging the bathroom and getting a side light in, because the units are broken back and front. And that was something that was suggested, and that could be done without too much trouble. But obviously it doesn't affect the upper levels, because you can't get light then down to the other lobbies. Sorry, you can't get light from there up.
I'll just leave that with you.
Thank you.
Can I ask, and if there's no further questions at this stage, was there any concerns you had with conditions that are recommended?
To be honest, I haven't had a chance to thoroughly go up. Just can I, if you want, the objectors can respond to the question regarding the balconies. I'll just have a quick look.
Okay, yeah, no, look, that's fine. So we will go back to, this is most unusual, we go back to the objectors and the second chance. Let's do that. Just to respond to some of the suggestions made about solid balustrade, for example, and some changes to, if you can respond to that, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Bond, just on that single issue of conditions. Thank you.
No, thanks. Thanks for the discussion and trying to work out ways to compromise. It's really appreciated. But we quite like the idea that I think if Duncan had, I believe had said that the side window would be glazed or wouldn't be viewable through. That's excellent. The wall where it is at its the current point, I'll just quickly share where the wall is currently. I felt was a good compromise between privacy and view, acknowledging, of course, that development will go ahead and that. But if the veranda could be brought back, we'd just so appreciate that. That would be fabulous if the developers amenable to that. And
so
I think
sorry, just to clarify, brought back to align with the balcony shown, your balcony, if you like, shown on that diagram. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, please. Yeah. And then the balustrade, just to preserve the view, we'd be fine if it was glass, because that would start to look. We're trying to work out the angles that would alter, and it'd start to give us some privacy back. And then I guess, like you've said, it's always a compromise.
Okay, and your comments on the council condition about having a privacy screen at that location?
If it had a privacy screen in that area there, we'd lose the sky, and I think we'd have to think about it. But I'd expect that, given that our unit won't have any more natural light shining into it after this development, that we'd prefer to have sky.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So can I just clarify, when you talked about the balcony being reduced slightly, I'm talking about the width up from the front of the main living area out to the road. That's one dimension. But then the other dimension that Brendan suggested was, to reduce it back a little bit where that cursor is. So
That
we
would be,
talk.
that would be really good. That would be so appreciated.
Okay, so does it trimming it on both of those dimensions?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So let me just finally go back to Mr. Bond, just to, is there any conditions that you want to draw our attention to, whether there's any concern from the applicant?
It seems that principally the conditions relate to these issues. So any of those side windows that require obscure glazing, that's to be expected. And then the front balconies is what we're dealing with now. And aside from that, yeah, no, there's nothing really that I can see as any concern. So yes, how to address that privacy issue on the balcony? It's that, yeah, that's.
But can I just say, just because it occurred to me, David, you know, the design of a building it's a great compromise between a lot of things, and the word compromise for good architecture is actually a very bad word. You know, when you're actually staggering around, half doing this, half doing that. But I would have to say to you, obscure balconies are really quite ugly things. Obscure glass balconies. And this architect isn't using glass. He's using another kind of balustrade type. That would work better with a solid edge than suddenly having glass and then this. So personally, I wouldn't recommend. I would, you know, like I think if you sat down with a designer, they'd be able to explain it better to you. You don't really want a lot of ugly stuff in your face. It just wants to be neat and constrained. You know, that would be my recommendation, and it might be something that the architect can better handle.
Okay, yeah, I understand. No, I could imagine it'd mean that the building would look like a car with different coloured panels on it, or
all that kind of thing. I'm just very sympathetic. The architect's trying very hard to balance a whole lot of things at once. It's very hard.
Definitely. Yeah, no, we appreciate compromise. Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. We've gone well beyond the 3 minutes for each speaker, but I think it was well worthwhile. We've explored some things which will help us. So we've now heard from all the registered speakers, and as I say, I thank them all for their assistance. In accordance with our guidelines, the public meeting will now be closed, and the panel will move to a closed meeting to deliberate and vote on this matter. And as I say, we have a separate meeting with a number of other matters. The outcome from voting determination will be made available through the Council's website, either late tonight or tomorrow. A recording of the public meeting will also be made available through the Council's website. I also want to thank the Council staff for all of their assistance with today's meeting.